Jim Henson. Born on September 24, 1936, he became one of the pioneers to not only modern puppetry, but the special effects media in general. From his beloved Muppets to the creature effects in films such as Return to Oz, The Witches, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, one could say he and his companies Jim Henson Studios and Jim Henson Creature Productions were some of the most brilliant minds of the 20th century. Outside of the Muppet films most know him for, Jim did attempt to dabble in more mature subjects and especially the fantasy genre with projects such as The Dark Crystal and Labyrinth. Unfortunately, neither were much success box office-wise at the time, but have since gained a cult following and are now considered classic films, with the movies spawning comic books, toys, video games, and television shows. Unfortunately, Jim will not be able to see these films become the pinnacle of fantasy, as he unfortunately passed away on May 16, 1990, though his legacy did not stop as his 5 children took over in different aspects, mainly Brian Henson, and the company would continue to pump out hits such as The Muppet Christmas Carol, Treasure Island, and The Muppets. However, the company still also continued to dabble in the more mature audience and fantasy settings, which is where we are today. Although Dark Crystal and Labyrinth are considered the 2 highlights of the Henson high fantasy genre, I'm here to tell you that there is a third film, just as high fantasy, but has yet to have gained the cult status of its sibling films. So today, let's talk about MirrorMask. The film was directed by first-time director Dave McKean and written by award-winning author Neil Gaiman. The two had worked previously together on a comic book collaboration, Violent Cases, which is where Dave's work is more notable as he is a comic illustrator. Premiering on January 25, 2005 at the Sundance Festival, it was met with overwhelming critical praise for its creature effects and visuals, but there were complaints about the overall story. Originally set as a direct-to-video film, it would get a limited theatrical release later that September in the US, and that following March 2006 in the UK. Unfortunately, like Dark Crystal and Labyrinth, it was a box office bomb. However, once released on DVD, it seemed to have garnered better sales, with even Neil being quoted as the sales being better than expected. And this is where I was first introduced to the film, not by DVD, but with Sony's UMD for the PSP. See, Sony was heavily pushing this format during the mid to late 2000s, with many big budget as well as smaller budget films sharing the same shelf space. These were actually pretty budget-friendly for a high schooler such as myself at the time, who picked this film up for $5 at GameStop due to the intrinsic box art and the fact that it was flaunted as Jim Henson's company's newest creation. So let's hop into a trip to this fantastical adventure, and hopefully you'll see why I feel this film should be praised just as much as Jim's previous endeavors into the fantasy genre. We start off as a kid-friendly Tarantino film as we see our main character, Helena, played by Stephanie Leonidas, entertain herself and seemingly foreshadow some of the plot points and dialogue of her soon-to-be adventure. The opening credits are gorgeous, almost a pop-up book style done in a minimalist art. The credits are intercut with Helena and her family getting ready for the opening night at the family circus. Though Helena has become tired of the circus, and thus her and her mom get into a fight about wanting a more normal life, and Helena eventually wishing her mother was dead. The circus show begins as normal. The costumes feel very otherworldly. Instead of using usual bright colors and white faces, we get a lot of washed out colors and paper mache type of masks. Soon her mother becomes ill and faints, and the night ends with a ride in the ambulance. We skip to 10 days later where Helena is drawing a get well soon card. The art on the nearby wall shows more of a very creative mind seemingly trapped in a very normal world as we see her travel to the hospital. Now, we never are told what exactly the mom's illness is, but the dialogue seems to suggest possibly some sort of cancer, as Helena is warned not to tire her mother out, and she eventually finds out that her mom is going to need an operation later that night. There are also aspects, once we enter the fantasy portion of the film, that reflect a cancerous type of creature known simply as the darkness that consumes everything it touches. This, of course, stresses out Helena. Her dad tries to console her, but Helena blames herself for the reason she's in the hospital in the first place and has even said she was sorry. That night, she has a nightmare of the operation being held at the circus and her mother dying on the operating table. At first, she thinks she has woken back up in her room, but soon comes upon a circus troupe practicing. After some banter, a black ooze attacks one of the troupe, turning him into dust. Helena escapes with one of the other members, Valentine, played by Jason Barry. This character is pretty fun. Not only is the actor great, but he appears to not be human. Throughout the film, he keeps asking what is wrong with Helena's face, as unlike the rest of the human creatures in this world, she does not wear a mask. He also is apparently grossed out at her bunny slippers, as he assumes they are in fact alive. Now, from here on out, we are in the fantasy land, and yes, it's mostly the actors working against a green screen with very few practical effects. And I suppose one could say that the animation does not appear to have aged well, but I always felt the look was more stylistic. Sure, they could have gone in a more realistic style even for 2005, but the art mimics Helena's real-life drawings that were shown earlier, so I always assumed they kept more of an abstract feeling to match the art style. We are soon introduced to the first of many villainous creatures in the land, a sphinx. Valentine advises that it's looking for a book, not to read though, to eat. Valentine and Helena then use some other books to escape the one-room trap and explore the world further. The music here and in the entire film is done perfectly by British composer and saxophonist Lane Bellamy. It sets the mood for each scene perfectly, giving a nice jazzy punk sound that we seldom get in the fantasy genre. Soon a spy advises the Queen of the Darklands of Helena's return, assuming she is her runaway daughter. Some guards arrest Helena and take her out of the city. Valentine tries to stop them but fails terribly. While traveling through town, she sees that she is actually still asleep. Again, we get some more gorgeous visuals as we travel through this town. All the creatures seem to be made out of wood, boots, and other sort of knickknacks. She's taken to the person in charge of trying to find a charm that will keep the darkness from taking over everything. The Queen and the charm searcher of this world are played by the same actors as Helena's parents in the real world, kind of like a play. The charm searcher explains how the darkness happened by using miniature animated creatures. He explains that the charm is a gateway, but no one has ever seen it though. Helena realizes that since it is her dream, that means she will be the one to find the charm. Valentine catches up with Helena, and the two head to the library to get more information of what the charm may be. The library, like any fantasy world, is quite different than our own, for instead of pulling simply a book off the shelf, they fly about as butterflies and must be caught with a net. The first book found tells Helena the history of how both kingdoms were created, the light and the dark kingdom. The art style is very similar to Gaiman's other works, especially Coraline. Soon she finds another book, the really useful book, that is kind of a guide/hint giver that assists Helena in her journey. While journeying, Helena notices that all the buildings look like her drawings, but while looking through one of the windows, she notices that she is no longer asleep in her bed. Valentine does not see the same, and to him it's just a rundown house. The next stop is the giants orbiting, and no, it's not a wordplay, it's literal giants orbiting. But first she meets another sphinx that asks the age-old question,
what walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs in the afternoon, and 3 legs in the evening?
Helena beats the question, confuses the sphinx with her own riddle. Valentine also has to do the same, and probably has one of the best lines in the film.
Look! An idiot! Where?
The orbiting giants talk very slowly, which causes a bit of stress as the shadow finds the two and is quickly heading towards them. The giants give Helena a small box that supposedly will help her find said charm before the two are succumbed by the shadow, but not before telling that the charm is the MirrorMask, as well as giving her her next clue. Once safe, Helena opens the box and discovers a key. The two then continue on the journey now to find what door would be opened by said key. Valentine suggests asking the owner of a mask shop where or really what is a MirrorMask. The store is owned by an elderly lady that owns more sphinx. The lady invites them in for food and tells Helena she must first wash her hands. In the restroom, she peeks out of another window to see a different version, a more angry and destructive version of herself, yelling at her dad. She returns to the old lady to hear her tell about the MirrorMask, who describes it as an item that would grant the user exactly what they needed once they put it on. Though it is questionable if the lady actually knows what she's talking about, as she appears senile. They notice the Sphinx eyeing them down and decide to leave. Throughout the film, by now, Valentine keeps advising,
"But I'm a very important man. I've got a tower."
And Helen asks him why he keeps saying this instead of actually being in his tower. Apparently, though, he and the tower have had a fight and are not on good terms right now. During this conversation, they are cornered by more Sphinx, but the useful book tells them to sacrifice some of its pages so they can escape. The two make it to the highest point they can find, with the top castle matching the design of the key. At the top, Helena comes across the most odd creatures yet. Gorilla-like pigeon creatures that are all named Bob, well, all but one, whose name is Malcolm. They can't say much, and when they slap each other about, their beaks fall off. But soon the Dark Queen's minions catch up with our main characters and begin to take over the Bobs. Malcolm and a few of the others save Helena and Valentine and get them to safety. They fly high above the city where Helena finds something shining in the water and asks for her and Valentine to be dropped off there. Soon after being dropped off, Helena looks through another window and finds herself hooking up with someone that she herself calls Valentine talks her down from her confusion and advises that they are on the border, which is filled with dreams, memories, and hopes. Helena wanders about and talks to her mother, or more so the Queen of Light. It appears that possibly the Queen and Helena might be sharing a dream, as she is aware that she is still under and on the surgeon table. Her mom tries to help her, but soon disappears again. Helena decides that since it is her dream, she would know exactly where the MirrorMask would be. Inside is a tower filled with keyholes, but at the same time, the outside Helena is literally destroying the dream world by crumbling up all the papers on Helena's wall and placing the small hut near the Dark Queen's castle. Helena is injured and waits while Valentine advises he will go get help. Helena is once again captured by a different set of knights, and then she finds herself face to face with the Dark Queen. Helena advises the Queen that she's not her daughter, but the Queen says she'll do since she looks similar enough. We then find out Valentine is the reason that Helena and the Queen are face to face. After getting his reward, he scuttles off. She is sent to her chambers to get changed, which is where I was first introduced to the song Close to You, originally sung by the Carpenters. This cover makes the love song seem very eerie. It's honestly a really good cover in my opinion, composed by Lane Bellamy and sung by Swedish singer Josephine Kronholm. Helena gets a goth makeover and seems to adjust to her new home at first, even having the same black eyes as the Dark Queen. Elsewhere, Valentine feels regretful of his selling out. He returns to the hut and tries his hand at the locked boxes, before finally unlocking the box, only to find that where the MirrorMask once was is now empty, with a note from the real Dark Princess advising she's found the MirrorMask and used it to swap places with Helena and her world. At dinner, Helena confronts the Queen about this, but the Queen is in denial. Valentine meets back up with Helena and apologizes for not just selling her out, but also for not listening to her about the windows. Helena regains her consciousness and listens in on the Dark Queen, finding out more areas of the dream world are beginning to disappear, all while trying to figure out where the MirrorMask ended up. Valentine gives Helena the really useful book that now only has one page left.
Remember what your mother told you.
And the advice that Helena remembers is that sometimes what you're looking for is right in front of you, causing Helena to stick her face into the mirror and thus finally finding the MirrorMask. The two escape as they are now in search of a window in order to swap places once more with the Dark Princess version of herself. The two stop shortly into their escape, however, as Valentine finds an enormous fruit and, being the glutton-minded person that he is, decides to literally dig into it. While doing so, a random lady asks if Valentine is a holy man, as the fruit allows anyone to see the future and the holy ones tend to write full books on what they see. The fruit then shows Valentine a future where he betrays Helena once again and uses the MirrorMask to allow himself to escape the dream world, but eventually ends up being a waiter way out of his element, causing him to fearfully cry out,
No, I don't want to be a waiter!
The Dark Queen is advised that Helena has escaped and goes on a chase to find her, literally turning into the darkness herself. She finally catches up and ends up looking like the cover of a System Shock video game. Helena tells her that the real princess, and as an extension herself, isn't a child anymore and should be allowed to be given a bit more independency and trust in her decisions. The Queen laughs this off and begins to attack Helena and Valentine. However, Valentine finally apologizes to his tower and calls upon it to rescue them. They escape and Helena finds a window that peers back into her world, but it's too late. Princess Helena has destroyed all the windows and goes back to the porch to destroy all of the artwork. But she forgets that chalk artwork created and is finally thwarted by the window in the porch door. Helena is woken up by her father as he receives a phone call from the hospital advising that the surgery was a success. It then skips to a few months later. The mother has fully recovered, the circus is back in business, and the human counterpart to Valentine appears, searching for a job at the circus. And that is MirrorMask. Sure, the art style might feel off or outdated, but I feel it makes it seem somewhat timeless and artistically unique, especially for a fantasy setting. The story is simple but coherent and flows with an even pace from scene to scene. The characters, even the villains, are all a joy to watch, and the main characters play off each other very well. It definitely captures the spirit of the Jim Henson studio as well as the creativeness of the man himself, and I think he would be proud of this film. Some may mention that it's not truly a Jim Henson work since there's much more CGI than practical effects. However, Jim was very much one of the early adopters of CGI, finding ways to incorporate it into his films as early as Labyrinth itself. He even used it heavily in his show, The Jim Henson Hour, and as of the recording of this video can still see one of the earliest uses of a CGI as a puppet at the Walt Disney World ride Muppet Vision 3D with the character Waldo C. Graphic. But what are your thoughts on MirrorMask? I really want to read them. Were you introduced to this film back when it was released, or more recently, and how do you think it stacks up against the other Henson fantasy classics? You can find this film on DVD and Blu-ray, though the Blu-ray appears to have gone out of print and is pretty expensive. It's also available on a few streaming services, including right here on YouTube. Until next time, thank you and have a good day. Bye-bye.
Just tell me.
Look! An idiot!
Where?